Hello, everyone. Welcome to the fifth installment of our AI webinar series. We're thrilled to have a really great program for you all today. We're going to spend an hour together, roughly 30 minutes, talking about top AI tools for marketing communications professionals. And then we're going to have an amazing discussion amongst some of the leading creators in the AI space regarding how to work with creators vis-a-vis communicating AI strategies and technologies and implementation. So it should be a really great hour. If you have a chance to drop a question in the QA box, we are going to answer those questions after we finish the panel, and we'll send those along to you. So with that, oh, people are saying they can't hear. Oh, works for some people, so I'll assume it is working. Why don't we dive in? Two quotes that we think quite a bit about at Edelman. On the left, Sundar said fairly recently, AI is one of the most important things humanity is working on. It's more profound than electricity or fire. More recently, Reid Hoffman talked about the need for employees and companies to ready themselves for this generative AI revolution. And we think at Edelman, collectively with our clients and partners, that it's our responsibility to shepherd the industry along and to be partners in that path to ensure that our employees and our partners and clients' employees are well situated for this generative AI evolution. And so we've done quite a bit of work in this space, and I'm going to be able to share with you today two amazing presenters who have been leading a lot of that work. Andrew Dawson, who has over a decade of work at the intersection of AI and intelligence, as well as Alexia Adana, who is a director of creative technology at Edelman, as well as a leading creator who is going to both talk about tools today, but then also participate in the panel. So can't wait to hear Alexia and her colleagues later on the panel as well. If we dive in, AI has an opportunity to really unlock tremendous value for all of our organizations. When we consider the business impact that AI will have as companies move along the AI maturity curve from awareness and education about the tools to driving internal efficiencies to automating broader workflows and even to unlocking new capabilities and profitability and products and solutions, the opportunities are endless. But we are still at the very early stages collectively. And there's a lot of excitement to jump in. There are roughly 80,000 companies today in the enterprise talking about tools and solutions that can help our businesses. And in fact, we see both rising investment from venture capital and private equity and the public sector. We see these new companies being formed every day, and we see a rising consumer interest in all of this activity. So we're living in a real moment. But inevitably, and we all on this call have likely been through prior tech hype cycles before. There is this peak of inflated expectations when we think new technology and new solutions will solve all of our problems. And then we dive into the trough of disillusionment only to hopefully come out the other side, which we most often do. But the reality is that trough can be a very narrow and shallow trough, or it can be very wide and very deep. And so we think about it through the lens of communicators as our responsibility to both be effective stewards and users of technology, but also as effective communicators, so that trough is as narrow and as shallow as possible, and we can reap the maximum benefit as quickly as possible from these tools and solutions and this technical revolution. So one of the things we found in the last year or so at Edelman, as we've been guiding our clients through their own AI maturity curve, is that starting with tools is an inevitable recipe for disaster. Many CEOs, many CFOs Many boards are asking communications and marketing professionals, for instance, how you're using AI today. So people want to go out and license software, license solutions so that they can show that they're investing and that they're participating. But inevitably, this leads to lots of capital being spent. So roughly $1.5 trillion are at risk from a technology perspective per Deloitte. And we see lots of projects fail. The RAND Corporation recently came out with a number that roughly 80%, 4 out of every 5 AI projects fail. Why do they fail? There's certainly lots of reasons, but the primary one is technology in search of solutions instead of understanding what the user benefit is, what the use cases are that we're trying to drive, and then backing into the workflows and then the tools that will be most successful in deriving that user benefit. So how do we bring that 80% down? How do we safeguard that $1.5 trillion of investment? We've done quite a bit of work regarding marketing communications and those questions. Recently, we looked at roughly 200 companies across major LLMs, writing platforms, research, analysis, design, and ideation to really understand which of these would be most successful for our teams, but also for our partners and our clients in deriving the most benefit from generative AI. Some of these companies you may know quite well. Some of these may be likely new to you. Go to the next slide. We went through a really interesting methodology to get to the companies that you're going to see today. We started with reviewing those 200 plus companies through what we called 4 enterprise-ready markers. These were things like security and compliance and ensuring that if we were to recommend these to a client or to a partner, or if we were to use it internally, these tools would be available and safe for the enterprise. And then we took those 200 companies and we ran them through 6 core use cases, which we're going to touch on in a moment, to understand specifically how applicable they were for marketing communications professionals. And then lastly, we took those 6 core use cases and those 200 companies, and we ran through an 8-stage evaluation process, which included blinded peer assessments of the different platforms, surveys, as well as 2 rounds of vendor interviews and demos. So really got in deep to understand not just were they enterprise ready, not just were they relevant to the core use cases, but were they the best of the best relative to those core use cases. Those core use cases: writing, ideation, data synthesis, research, design, and analysis. 6 that we thought were highly relevant, hopefully, to all the folks on this webinar. So today's focus, we have data and we have the work on writing and research and ideation, but for the sake of time, we're going to talk about major LLMs. We're going to talk about analysis, and we're going to discuss design as well. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to my colleague, Andrew Dawson, who's going to dive into major LLMs and begin the actual research.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brian. It's a pleasure to be here. I think that what makes this report really interesting is that it's incredibly in-depth. So we're going to go over a number of things today for the LLMs and social listening, but I do invite everyone on the call to read the report in its totality as it covers a number of aspects that we're not going to go into detail here. It's only appropriate that we start with large language models because they are becoming the fruit by which we communicate. It's the way that we are getting into our data. It's usually people's first introduction into the world of AI. And what makes these LLMs so important is that it represents the democratization of data across non-technical teams. For the first time, you're able to head into your data straight away, whether it's a CSV, call transcripts, and all of these elements to really glean insights that are going to help move marketing and communications forward and speed up your efficiency. For this particular report, we focused on ChatGPT for Enterprise, Microsoft Copilot, Gemini, Claude, and Writer. And the results were very interesting in what we were able to see across the market. When we think about the LLMs, one of the first hypotheses we had was there was going to be one standout, right? There was going to be one amazing tool that kind of changed everything for everyone. We were going to come back with one gold star. But what we identified was that we really had to understand what they were best at, right? How they stood out as a use case versus an entire tool set that was good at everything. For example, ChatGPT for Enterprise stands out and it's best in class for analyzing conversational and complex data. What it makes it really incredible is that you're able to drop in lots of different pieces of information. Makes it ideal for creating in-depth thought leadership pieces, crafting detailed narratives, interpreting qualitative inputs. It really is a great place to start for your analysis. Microsoft 365 shines in its maintaining voice consistency across enterprise communications. Integrated directly into the Microsoft ecosystem, it enables organizations to scale their messaging with precision, ensuring tone. It's really an incredible tool that works directly into the work you're already doing. And finally, Writer. Writer is one that not everyone was familiar with, and we're really excited to introduce people to it. It excels at handling raw data and transforming that into meaningful reports and summary. These tools demonstrated a huge diverse capability. So let's take a look a little bit more into what makes them unique. ChatGPT for Enterprise is an absolute standout in its capability to perform qualitative analysis across disparate data sets. I'll tell you, somebody who's worked in data for 12 years, the act of lining up receipts with purchase data, with econometric data, with social data, with earned media data, used to take the labor of a full team, many hours or weeks or sometimes months to get to a synthesized result. What ChatGPT does very, very quickly, and what it does the best at, is that it is able to triangulate those across very disparate data sources, which I particularly love, and that's where we saw them as an absolute standout. Not to harp on this again, but most of us kind of work in this Office 365 world. So when Copilot was introduced, what it does is it's adding efficiencies into our life. So the integration of 365 helps us draft and analyze very quickly. It's part of your suite, so it helps you every day in the work you're doing. And conversely, when you have Writer, Writer stands out because it's taking all of that information and it's able to synthesize reports in a very, very simplistic way. It's a tool that I invite everyone to go to, sample and try, as it is an absolute standout in the ability to create actionable and meaningful reports. I love the world of social listening. It's an entire segment that's been growing for years and years, from the early days of Radian to where we are today. It's really incredible to see where we've gotten. What's really fascinating about social listening is it now provides a 360 view into the market, enables smarter and faster, more data-driven marketing decisions. With AI, we are turning every user into an analyst. What used to take a specialty group is now democratized again, enabling to glean insights in a moment. Whether you understand what happened, what's going to happen, what's predictive, what we think is going to happen, AI is creating inroads to really help us provide analysis at scale. For this, we looked at Quid, Meltwater, Talkwalker, Signal AI, and Brandwatch to understand who were the highest market performers in the space. And for this, we actually did have two standouts. First, let's talk about Quid. Right? Quid seamlessly embedded generative AI systems. It's an incredible system. They were an early adopter in the space. They were using large network analysis to understand and identify peaks and valleys at the time. It was the merger of two great companies, so you were able to see really what they were able to put out. What makes them unique is its ability to simplify strategic analysis through AI-powered summaries. It really helps you understand in that moment. So rather than looking at a bump and thinking, hey, I wonder what happened here, they help you understand through AI exactly what happened, exactly what the impact is to your brand, exactly what the impact is to your communications. Secondly, we've got Meltwater. Meltwater pairs its AI cluster technology with 365 to deliver real-time insights directly within a familiar enterprise tool like Teams. It really is the best of both worlds. Where Meltwater stands out is their ability to highlight key trends and also reduce the manual labor traditionally required for analysis. Easy query writing, easy in, easy out. But just like we saw before, there are standout reasons here that really make them useful for one case or another, right? This is a multi-tool situation. So we're thinking about Quid, we're thinking about event detection, early detection. Their network maps, their ability to analyze small clusters of audiences and do deep dives into them really make them a standout. For Meltwater, pairing your social listening solution with your workflow solution has is going to kind of build efficiencies into your life that you would never have capable before. I personally played around with the 365 integration and seeing what they're able to do. It allows me to, in my work environment with my teams, collaborate on data and utilize that AI to synthesize insights and inputs in real time to maximize our workflows. Really excited to turn things over to Alexia now to take you through the design and creative.
Hello, everyone. That was really informative, Andrew. Thank you. Our world is a bit different. It's a bit more nuanced, and it's a very exciting one in the world of creative and design. So as we know, these tools are going to accelerate workflows, they can cut costs, and they can offer seamless integration with existing platforms. These tools are very critical to integrate into creative and design workflows, and they're making things that were not possible even just a couple years ago possible. And so when we were going through the act of kind of assessing which ones were going to be best for enterprise, the key headline here is these are going to be tools that are going to ultimately protect client data. So we know there are hundreds of different creative and design tools out there, but these are the ones that are going to be the best for brand safety. So going on the next slide. This is kind of a snapshot of where we landed in the three major categories: image, audio, and video. So again, we know that there's tons of tools available, but as you can see, looking at the recommendations for each of these, you can see where they excel and where they might not excel as much. And so we have these categories across image, video, audio, quality of outputs, ecosystem integration, and roadmap. And so, as you all probably know, a lot of creative and design tools can do many different things. So it was a bit challenging for us to figure out a framework for how we are going to present our recommendations. So even though one tool might not really have any kind of image generation capabilities, including all of these in the kind of categories helps you all kind of get a well-rounded understanding of how these tools compare to each other. So Adobe, of course, is going to excel at image generation, and the ecosystem integration is really powerful as it's already integrated into the Adobe Creative Suite ecosystem. And we continue to see the quality of outputs continue to improve with the evolution of the models and backed on that robust Adobe stock library. And there's an amazing roadmap. As many of you might know, they just announced that Adobe's going to have a video tool. And so this Adobe is going to continue to evolve, and we feel really strongly as our AI image recommendation for enterprise. Moving into audio, audio is probably one of the newer Gen AI capabilities over the last couple of years. That's very quickly, starting to evolve. 11 Labs to us is the leader in terms of enterprise. They have a really incredible roadmap. Not only do they do text to speech and speech to speech, but they're doing sound effects that integrates really seamlessly into ecosystems, especially when using APIs. The quality is unmatched with the audio as well. And then moving into video, there's of course a ton of options on the market right now, even the aforementioned Adobe. Runway is right now our standout recommendation. The quality is incredible and it continues to evolve every day. The roadmap, I don't know if you all have been paying attention, but Runway has come out with like at least one feature every 2 weeks in the last couple months alone. And their AI video capabilities are really powerful for creative and design teams. And so for image generation, kind of going a little bit deeper, Adobe Firefly is that leader in image generation. And because the enterprise is seamlessly integrated across Creative Cloud, your creative and design teams can just really just jump right into it. There's not any new learning curve. Generative fill and generative expand already use like very similar tools that people are used to, but also just the image generation. Now you can use reference images, you can use style images. What's really exciting with enterprises, now we have custom models that can be built. So you can actually take a product, train a custom model on that, and then create new content. And then when you combine that on the next slide, with something like Runway, then you're able to really expand the reach of the types of assets that you can make and the scale, the amount of content that you're able to make. And so this is just a snapshot. We just did a test once we got this capability. I just took a little tchotchke in my home and shot it on green screen. And you use it like photogrammetry, right? You shoot it from every angle, and then you're able to write in Firefly, train this custom model. There's very robust information on how to do this with the tagging. They make it very easy. And then within, like, I would say maybe an hour, we have this custom model, and then you can go right into Firefly and start generating content with it. You can put this figurine in different environments. You can have this figurine smile. You can have this figurine do different things. You could really play around with it. And then knowing that it's within that ecosystem of Adobe, you can go in and out of Photoshop, Illustrator, and really like take the content to the next level. And with Runway, we wanted to take that to the next level with bringing this custom model into a video environment. And double downing on why Runway is great. It has that industry customization. They just recently announced Act 1, which is going to kind of change, animation in really powerful ways. Because as I'm talking to you right now, looking into the camera, I could take a recording of this and then map it to an image of any character that I want. And they'll actually follow the nuances of my mouth and my eyes and my hand movements and stuff like that. So that's a really exciting update. They use responsible AI, and the integration, as you're about to see on the next slide, with tools like Adobe is really, really powerful. So our executive producer of AI on the production arm of the business, Gabe Michael, he couldn't be here today, but we worked together to make this. So we created the model, he put this together in Runway, and it all in all took us probably less than like a day and a half. And this is just to demonstrate how you can really scale and produce different types of content in ways that were just literally impossible a few years ago. And it's also very fun. So thankfully, we have tools that allow us to do this in a safe way that's also going to protect the data that we're working with. And so I'll pass it back to Fiona.
Thank you. Thank you, Alexia. And that video was adorable and really clever. So hello, everyone. I'm Fiona Hughes. I'm Head of Creator Marketing here at Edelman for EMEA. I'm so happy to be joined by you, Alexia, for this panel discussion, along with, you can see him here on the slide, creator and international best-selling author and futurist Bernard Marr. Bernard is a multi-award-winning and internationally best-selling author of over 20 books. He also writes a regular column for Forbes, advises and works with many of the world's best-known brands and organizations, and has a combined following of 4 million people across his social channels. Alexia, I will also do an intro to you, even though you've just been talking, but a more tailored one. Alexia has recently been named by Ad Age as a top leader shaping AI in marketing. She's a creative director, as you've just seen, focused on human-centered innovation. As an artist, she's developed generative AI creative in partnership with major brands like Microsoft, Adobe, and OpenAI. So this is our panel for today. During this panel, I'm going to be guiding the discussion for the next 30 or so minutes. But if you would like to put questions to our panelists as well, you would be very welcome. Please put them in the Q&A box throughout, and we will share answers to your questions as a follow-up. So the purpose of this panel is to explore how creators can help brands shape their AI narrative. And just as the success of tools lies heavily in how well they're vetted for purpose, so is that critical in the assessment of which creators brands should work with. Creators play such an important role in how we connect with and understand AI today and into the future. How we consume news, how we consume content has changed and is always changing, with creator-led content having more of an impact now than traditional media outlets. And one of the reasons why I love working with creators is that they are so good at breaking down complex concepts and presenting them to their audiences in ways that make sense to their communities. So with all of that in mind, let's get into today's discussion. I'm going to start with a, in theory, simple question, and that is, Bernard, how would you define a creator?
Yeah, thank you, Fiona. I like the fact that you're calling it creator rather than influencer, because I've seen myself as someone that creates for a long time. I've written books, even when I was at Cambridge University as a researcher. I've always felt I wanted to create content that educates, that informs. And when then this whole influencer marketing field came up, and I always thought, how do I fit in? So I really see a creator as someone that consistently produces content that is valuable, that educates, that informs, and is able to build trust through their own expertise and through authenticity, which I think is really important. And what I see in the field of AI is that we get a whole range of creators, from people that are technical experts to people that have more business focus, or someone like me that sees his role as really looking at the future, looking at key trends and making them easily understandable for people that are interested in the topic.
Thank you. I love all of that. And you mentioned trust. Of course, it probably won't be a surprise to people who know Edelman to know we're going to be talking about trust shortly as well. Thank you for that. Alexia, thanks for joining us for this discussion. And how would you define a creator?
Yeah, similar to Bernard, creators are people who turn their passions into tangible experiences for others. It could be art, it could be photography, it could be storytelling, it could even be memes. Creators bring their unique vision to life in ways that evoke emotions and connect with diverse audiences and really inspire people. So in today's landscape, they're more than just makers, they're actual drivers of culture. And that's how they can use emerging technologies to really bridge that human experience to brands. So they're not just making, they're contextualizing, and by means of contextualizing, connecting.
Absolutely. And yes, the process of that, the journey of that is something that we're going to delve more into today. So thank you. Exactly that. Bernard, I'd love to go back to you. And you've obviously built a global reputation as a trusted voice in AI. From your perspective and what you've seen over the last few years, how can brands effectively leverage creators to simplify and humanize complex AI topics for consumers?
Yeah, there's so many different ways they can do this. For me, it's about telling real world examples and telling stories and humanizing content and humanizing AI to some extent. Because in the end, it's about how it affects people, how it affects businesses. And I work with lots of different organizations across so many different areas. So I obviously work with all the big tech companies. So you've mentioned Adobe. I work with them telling the world about image generation capabilities, but I work with Microsoft and Google and Meta to help them tell the stories of what they see in AI. But I also work with just normal brands like Walmart, for example. They came to me and said, we're doing lots of really exciting stuff in AI. Nobody really knows about what we're doing. We're finding it really difficult to attract new talent. So can you help us tell some of the stories of what we're doing? And then I work with brands like IKEA, for example, who are now building AI into their capabilities, into their products and services. Even you can now use their app to basically redesign your front room and place your sofas there, and they have a generative AI tool that helps you, almost becomes your personal designer. And they wanted to tell that story and how important it was for them to be ethical in the use of AI, and that they're not trying to replace people, but this is about enhancing people. So I work with them. And then I work with companies like, or brands like Wimbledon and Shell and Kraft Heinz, all around how they're using AI and how this is reshaping what they're doing.
And something that or two things that you said there that really sort of made my ears prick up. You talked about storytelling, and you talked about the sort of human stories. And I would say, from the work that I do and that the teams here do, the best use of AI in communications is when the final output feels human, despite the fact that the topic may be AI, or AI may have played a critical role behind the scenes. And it's, the originality of the prompts, the back and forth refinement, the self-critiquing, and then, as we saw with the lovely pieces of content that Alexia just shared, it's the creativity and the direction that transforms that AI assisted work into something really strong. So it's like the thoughtfulness woven into the final output that really helps make it stand out.
Yeah, so true. I've just written an article about why AI won't replace us, and it's exactly this:
saw
is the
that.
human creativity that it will never replace. And for me, AI gives human superpowers that we've never seen before. Like Alexis has just shown us what he can now do, these amazing things. But in the end, is human creativity and everything that makes us humans that makes these things great.
So this leads us seamlessly on to talk about the role that creators like you are increasingly playing in becoming the bridge between technology and consumers. Alexia, I'd love to ask you, what unique strengths do you think creators bring to helping brands communicate their AI initiatives?
Yeah, what's really awesome about being a creator and being a creative is we inherently have that what if mindset that really fuels storytelling and eventually kind of fuels innovation. So the strength in creator lies in the ability to just experiment. You're unconstrained by traditional guidelines. There's no brand telling you what to do when you're just creating your own thing. And you have this personal connection to your audience already. So it allows creators to kind of humanize these complex AI concepts within their own way of creating. So, for example, a creator might demonstrate an AI feature through like an interactive art project that touches on themes of identity and belonging in a way that the audience there can actually feel like they're a part of through some kind of immersive experience. And so we're starting to see a lot of that at really cool like art and tech exhibitions, and you really get a lens into how these creators are thinking about technology, and it actually informs these tech companies and different brands on how they might approach it as well. So I think I think creators are probably one of the best in groups of people to approach when it comes to like, how do we bridge technology with our consumer in a way that's going to not only be impactful, but also really engaging.
Yeah, and what you've just described feeds into what you said before about really then driving culture. I mean, it's really cool. Bernard, I'd love to ask you the same question. What unique strengths do you think creators bring to help brands communicate their AI initiatives?
For me, is authenticity and independence. That lots of brands work with me because I have an audience that trusts me, that have followed me for a long time, and hopefully I've built up a reputation over the last 20 years that I know the kind of stuff I'm talking about. And I think so, and I have an authentic voice. So it's about balancing the amazing things that AI can do, for example, but also challenging some of the rhetoric that people talk about. We mentioned AI will give us superpowers, but we also have to be honest that there will be some job displacement, and there will be lots of challenges we have to face around ethics, around misinformation on the internet, and so on. So for me, I need to be true to myself and my own ethical background and what I believe is right. And I think this is what people get, and this is what I think creators can bring to brands.
and really building on that, and you've sort of covered some of this already, but how would you say creators balance balance that credibility while still partnering with brands, Bernard?
Yeah, that's a challenge. And I think there are some brands that approach me and want to work with me, and they say, we want you to say these things and ask these questions and put this in your articles. And then I am lucky enough that I can pick and choose the brands I want to work with, and I basically say no. And I think this is really important as a creator. I think it must be super difficult when you're starting off and you're trying to find brands to work with, and balancing this need to get someone to give you some money with writing authentic content. And I feel very lucky that I feel I can really maintain my independence. I can say no. And it's about, for me, keeping control of your content, that you don't become a foghorn for someone else, but you are writing the stories that you want to write about and you know your audience is interested in.
Absolutely. Alexia, do you have anything to add around how creators balance that credibility when partnering with brands?
Yeah, I feel like everything that Bernard said, and something else that I think is really important is starting with alignment and working with brands that share your values and resonate with your audience. I think transparency about the partnership and the creative process is also essential. One creator that I really love and have collaborated with as an artist, Don Allen III. You all have probably seen him. He just did some really fun stuff with the Ray-Ban Metas at a creator event. He taught me something early on, like in his inbound system, he actually has a mandatory question for brands to fill out. What are your values? What are the values that drive your work? And why do you think this partnership, will foster those shared values? And that was something that I had never really thought about, but that helps him weed out from the get-go the types of people that he works with to make sure that there's no kind of inauthenticity down the line. Nobody's kind of like taking advantage of the other person. It's not as like transactional. So I think, yeah, aligning on those shared values very early on is really important for that credibility.
I'm so glad you brought that up. It's something that we really practice, and we say, before we look at creator credibility, we should always look at, the brand positioning first. Like, where does the brand stand on this? What are the brand values on this? And when that is really clear, that then becomes a really solid standing point on which to assess the right partners. So yeah, absolutely.
And while Alexis was talking, there was something else came to my mind, that I think balancing your content as well, so that you always have some content that is done in collaboration with a sponsor, with a brand. But in my case, probably it is less than one out of 10 pieces of content or more that I produce. So the vast majority of my content is content I want to produce because I think is super interesting and I know people find interesting and valuable.
Yeah. And there's like, how to be authentic is to be authentic. I love it. Slight change of direction. Alexia, I'd love to ask you about the biggest fears that consumers have about AI and how creators can help address those fears.
Yeah, for sure. As we know, people tend to fear what they don't understand. And even a lot of us do not understand all the nuances of AI. We all kind of call ourselves subject matter experts, but it's really hard to be an expert in something that is like evolving so quickly. So yes, we know, we're in these tools every day. We have a certain level of expertise, but there's a lot that even we don't understand. So imagine the everyday consumer who their most access to AI is asking Siri to like hold it, make a timer for 15 minutes, right? So I think the biggest fear is like, how is this relevant to my life? Why should I care about something that seems like it's going to do more harm than good? And so I think with creators, it's like, again, going back to like, I'm using this tool in a way that's actually helping my life in a very authentic way, like very practical. The best creators are really showing like the value of doing or creating or integrating that has like a very tangible payoff. So I think it's really important for, you know, us to make sure that we are not just like creating things that we think people, you know, want to see or you know, think that people are interested in, but using the data to understand and actually like responding to what people are actually asking for. Like, what does the everyday consumer actually need, and how is AI going to help them do that?
I love that. Bernard, do you have anything additional on that point?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of fear around AI. And as Alexa said, it's the fear of the unknown, but there's also more fundamental fears, I think, around what does it mean for my job? And even I think about this every single day because I have an AI version of myself that can do what I'm doing here now, very similar things. And so there's a fear on job displacement and augmentation. There's a fear around security, safety, and to some extent the loss of control in especially in critical decision making. There's a fear around a loss of the human connection in lots of different things. So there's lots of very powerful fears, as well as the fear of where will this all evolve to. So we have now tools that are very powerful, but they, as we just seen, they tools that are creating music and tools that can help us design things and create content. And they are all very good at specific things, but how long will it take for all of this to come together to create more general artificial intelligence, or potentially even super intelligence that supersedes human intelligence in pretty much everything? And so people are, and then there are fears around security, safety, potentially using this for for malicious purposes, from cyber attacks to using this in wars and robots that fight us. So there's lots of fears, very often coming from films and other things, but they are very real because people are working on these technologies.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point, Bernard, because yeah, it's not just consumer fears, it's also creator fears, which are
Mm.
very valid. Um, Everything that you're talking about, you know, job displacement and over-reliance on AI, what that does for the creative industry. These are all things that we definitely should be thinking about. And I do think as, you know, professionals who have the ability to put out, you know, marketing communications and work with these creators, having those guidelines around, you know, the ethics of how we create and how we're transparent and how we're operating internally to ensure that it is human-centered and we're not over-relying on AI and we're empowering our teams to use AI in a way that's just amplifying the existing workflow rather than replacing it. I think that that creator and consumer, those fears, they're different, but there is a lot of overlap. So I think that was really great to bring up, Bernard.
Good, yeah, I agree.
And that sort of human side, technical side of AI that you're talking about, how does that impact, and Bernard first, I guess, on this, how does that impact which stories you tell? And also what advice that you would give to the brands that you work with on how they frame their own AI narratives?
Yeah, so for me, the stories I'm telling are driven by my own interest and
Mm.
what I think the people in my audience are interested in. So I am lucky enough that I get lots of comments on my posts, or when I give keynotes somewhere or do webinars, I, people ask questions, and this then guides me what I want to write about. So a good example is every time I talk about future trends and AI capabilities, people say, okay, what does this mean for our jobs? And as a father of three children, three teenagers now, I worry about this too, thinking, okay, how do they get ready for the future of work? And this that I then started writing about the skills that are that humans need to focus on, and the skills we don't want to compete with machines on. And I ended up writing an entire book about it. So very often I start writing individual pieces of content, and when then brands approach me, say we're interested in talking about AI and these are the key topics we would like to talk about. I then try to align this with the things that I know people want to hear about, what they're interested in, what their fears are, what they're curious about, and in the same way that I am curious about those topics. And that for me is the perfect guide. And in terms of advice to brands, I think the best advice is to work together with creators who understand the audience and understand some of the bigger questions people have. Because sometimes brands come to me and say, we want to talk about this latest technical innovation. And then I can probably help them reposition this a little bit and say there's a much bigger context. Let's frame it in something slightly bigger that more people are really interested in. And I think bringing it back to practical examples and bringing it back to the human storytelling and the impact on people and businesses, for me, that's the sweet spot I'm working in.
Yeah, and I think what you've just said there is so important about that collaboration between brand and creator, and also ultimately then the collaboration between brand and audience that creators helping to facilitate and get the most out of all of that by the kind of active listening and communication. Alexia, what advice would you give to brands in a similar way about framing their AI narratives on sort of technical and human sides of AI?
Yeah, it's something that, we do a lot on the innovation side of the business here is like identifying a real problem to solve and which clients we could solve that problem with most effectively using these emerging technologies. So we know these tools have a lot of issues with bias. We know these tools have issues when it comes to marginalized groups. And that's an area that I'm kind of particularly interested in is like, we can't change the data set, but how can we do something that sends a message to, the developers and how these models are being created. And so I think it's focusing on future forward solutions, inclusivity, addressing things that, we think are important as these tools evolve and it feels beyond our control. But, there are things that we can do to at least address what we can't control.
Yeah, amen to that. And I feel like that also is going to go some way to addressing some of those fears that we were just talking about as well. It kind of leads us on to talking about sort of trust, and I promised we would talk a little bit about that. And so for the brand leaders here, I would love to just pose a question to you. Please drop your thoughts in the Q&A box because we can follow up with ideas after the session. And question for the brand leaders is, what's your biggest concern about using creators to bring your AI narratives to life? It'd be really helpful to hear from you and we can address it. And then just, back to our panelists. Alexia, trust is obviously a critical component when discussing AI. It's come up organically several times in the discussion already. How do you feel creators can ensure that their content fosters trust and transparency, especially when it's in a brand partnership?
Yeah, what's great, I think Bernard will have a lot of great insights from a creator lens. I think what I would love to speak to is these platforms are doing so much better at embedding that kind of transparency into the platform. So TikTok and Meta both have the ability to like mark something that is generated with AI. And also, in addition to that, on the back end, they're working with companies like Adobe and OpenAI to have markers that are able to tell if something was generated with AI. It's not perfect right now, but it is something that continues to evolve. So when you create something in DALL-E or when you create something in Firefly, there's additional markers in that backend metadata that platforms like Meta can signify and be like, oh, this might have been created with AI. So it's early days, and obviously there's going to be instances where it's not correct, but these are empowering creators to be transparent with their audience when they're putting out content in their platform. So you can also identify creators who are doing that consistently and are already building trust with their audience through putting those markers on the content they put out.
Thank you. Bernard, do you have anything you want to add on that from a creator POV?
Yeah, for me, trust is at the very basis of what I do. If people didn't trust me, I would have no followers. And I think trust you build through having an authentic voice, is about consistency, and it's about being honest and completely independent. I feel that I now live in a world where no one can tell me what they want me to say, and if they're not aligned. So this is where I think you made the point earlier. It's really important to partner with brands where your beliefs and values are aligned to some extent. And if they're not, then I don't want to work with them, and they don't want to work with me, I guess. Um, and then it's about authenticity and honesty, and about discussing both the benefits and the challenges and limitations of AI. That I see my role as someone that people can trust to cut through all the hype, because whenever we talk about all tech trends, so as a futurist, I don't just look at AI, I look at all future trends in business and technology. And there's so much hype. We've had the hype around the metaverse, and then we had the hype around AI, and the hype around big data, and all these things. And my role is to say, okay, there are clearly some limitations, there's clearly some amazing benefits. This is how it will likely to pan out in your industry. And these are the things you need to focus on. And these are the things you have to be careful of. And I think this is what people appreciate.
Yeah, and all of that rigor. Absolutely. Well, I'm going to finish us with one last question for you both, and it is quite a big one. But looking ahead, where do you see the biggest opportunities for brands and creators to collaborate on AI storytelling? And Bernard, I guess we'll start with you, if that's okay.
I can only see it from my perspective, and my audience is a B2B audience mainly. I see it in human stories. I see it in real world examples and in honest conversations. So I very often start with recording a podcast, a video podcast episode, where we have an hour's conversation about the topic. And then from there, I then create different pieces of content. So we then release the audio version, we release a video version to YouTube, we produce shorter versions of it, we produce articles and social media content across all platforms. And I think it's about having those honest conversations about real examples, and then bringing in the honesty and authenticity in that conversation. So it's not just a one-sided marketing message, but a truly valuable conversation that looks at limitations as well as benefits.
What you've just talked about there as well is not just around, it's not just specific to AI. It's just, I think, for me and what I do, it speaks to the way in which brands can work with creators now in general, which is moving, from maybe what we saw a few years ago, which is, hey, creator, let's work with me on a piece of content, to work with me in a consultative role and work with me on a whole content strategy, and let's be smart about what we make together and not just have one asset, but look at how we can have multiple. So I think that's really exciting. Alexia, what about you? What do you see as the biggest opportunity?
There are a lot of opportunities, but a couple that or I guess the one that stands out to me is more inclusive storytelling. So now you have so many creators who have the democratization of being able to tell their story. They have these tools that make it so much easier. They're so much accessible. And, with education and, providing more accessibility to these voices that otherwise may not have had the opportunity to tell their story, I think that's really exciting. And in the B2B world, it kind of goes into this inclusive design world. I was at Afrotech last week, and one of the most interesting panels was Apple talking about how they design accessible AirPods, and the whole process of trying to create a data set of the most amount of relevant people. But with AirPods, it's everyone, right? And so they were able to be like, well, what about people who are hard of hearing? And initially, this was not an audience that was being considered. And they were able to push through to do a very, I say simple, but you know, these are people who have way more skills in that world for me, but it sounded like they were able to add these hearing accessibility features without changing the fundamental structure of the AirPods. And by incorporating more inclusive design practices and initiatives, I think using AI, we're going to be able to identify a lot more of those audiences at like a faster speed using these large data sets. So that to me is like really awesome to see products and experiences being built and told by a much diverse audience.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Alexia. Thank you, Bernard, for sharing all of that incredible expertise and passion in this space and in the creator space in general. To the audience, go check Alexia and Bernard out on their social channels where you can see all of that in real time. But thank you both so much. Really enjoyed chatting with you.